On the night of April 14, 2014, several fighters of the Boko Haram terrorist group stormed a school dormitory for girls in the remote town of Chibok, a small Christian enclave in Borno State. 276 schoolgirls, mostly aged between 16 and 18, were taken at gunpoint through the forest to waiting trucks. The militants set fire to the school buildings thereafter. Within hours of the abduction, 57 girls managed to escape. Some hid in the bushes, others jumped out as they drove through the night at the Sambisa forest. Global outrage was swift. The Bring Back Our Girls campaign was born. It drew international support from the likes of Michelle Obama and other celebrities, making it a powerful movement. In 2016 and 2017, negotiations led to the highly publicized release of around 100 of the captives. A decade after that fateful night in April 2014, the world seems to have largely forgotten the plight of the Chibok girls. But for the victims and their families, the tragedy is ongoing.
When I remember this, my doctor,
I'm sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. Because she's the only best doctor
among those I have, that the God gave me.
So I will never forget her. I will never forget her. In fact,
I will never forget her. She said that she spent a week with her because she is her auntie. She said that when I go and meet her, she have two children and she's weaving. This is the work that she have to go. She learned in the bush.
Some of them also die as a result of labor, forceful labor in the bush. No any personnel to take care of them, like a nurses that can give them the necessary maternity services. Some die as a result of snake bite. Some because of anxiety and the rest. So not all of them are alive. That is the whole truth.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined in the studio by Mrs. Obegali Ezekwesili. She's the founder and board chair of the School of Politics, Policy and Governance. She's also the founder and president of Human Capital Africa. Mrs. Ezekwesili is also one of the leading advocates of the Bring Back Our Girls movement. Madam, thank you so much for joining us on Arise Prime Time.
Thank you.
It's been 10 years, a decade, a long time. And you were very active during the period when a lot of people were fighting for the return of the girls. As we sit here today, what are your thoughts as people try to remember 10 years of what happened?
In the first place, as I watched the father crying, and perhaps some Nigerians are only just saying this today or this week, this was what we saw, like literally every day or every other day for the 7 years before COVID that we actually went out to the Unity Fountain to stand and make demands for action that would rescue the Chibok girls. I have been quite perplexed at the fact that some Nigerians finally are coming to the realization that real human beings whose parents sent them to school were in fact taken. It was a difficult moment for our country when the tragedy occurred. And because it occurred within a political cycle, people decided that politics was more important than the sense of shared values of the dignity of the human life that we all subscribe to as basic instinct of our humanity. So looking at 10 years since we heard that news, I certainly heard that news by virtue of a tweet on the handle of BBC, when BBC tweeted that over 100 girls abducted in Borno, Nigeria, I actually tweeted back at them and said, is this verified? After I said that, then I told myself, it's BBC. This is not some rag sheet. So they wouldn't put out this kind of news, considering the severity of what they've put out, if there's no substance to it. And I began to tweet to find out whether there was some evidence on the ground. And I got tweets back that said, oh yes, something like that happened. I was frightened.
You know, you used the word realization, you know, to explain what was going on the minds of some people. But you do know that up to today, there are those who believe that this was stage managed or planned in order to embarrass the President Goodluck Jonathan administration. How do you see that?
So frankly speaking, I cannot arbitrate, I cannot determine what people think. I can work on the basis of the facts that I know. And one fact that I knew was establishing that girls were indeed taken from a school, that the parents of these girls had no idea where the daughters they sent to school had been taken. And so for me, as one literate enough in the knowledge of governance, the responsibility to establish what was going on with the girls belonged to the government of our country. And so all of the conjectures that people were making, I kept saying to people, can we focus on the girls? Girls are missing. As one who ran education for the country in the period that I was Minister of Education, the matter of girls' education was so important. For any society to achieve what it must achieve, whether productively or competitively in our world, it needs to optimize all of its human resources. And so the idea that we would keep girls away from school was anathema to me. It still is anathema to me. So as Minister of Education, I had, what's her name? Aisha Umar was my task team person for girls' education. And Yobe, Borno, and Adamawa were the key states of our focus. So imagine a situation where girls then go to school in those kinds of states or any state in our country, and then they get abducted, and we all sit around just yakking around on the matter of I mean, no. It was a total no for me. Like, you have the luxury to discuss all of this politics because your children are not the ones missing. So for me, those who have that luxury, they soon realized, incidentally, a number of them since realized that by joking with the matter of abduction of Chibok girls, they helped to fertilize what we now have as an industry of kidnaps, abduction, and all kinds of other things related to a collapse of the respect that we should have for human life.
Let's stay on that. Yes, you know, some things were political, and there were people that were more interested on rescuing the girls, like you said, a lot of Nigerians, while there were people that were playing politics with the whole thing. That single incident led to the downfall of the Jonathan government. It so damaged the government because some people thought that it was lackluster and did not respond immediately and as it should have. Were you proud of the role that you played during that period?
I am immensely proud of the fact that I refused to sit and watch the poor in our society be treated as people without agency. I mean, the facts are there for you. Look, one thing that I am shocked at is how people create false equivalencies. For goodness sake, could we have determined whether a government would play its role or not play its role. How could I have determined that? All we wanted was action for the girls. If that administration had woken up to the realization that it needed to act, and by the way, just look at the facts for themselves. Girls were abducted on the night of the 14th. It was not until May 5th that we heard anything from the leader of government. How do you, please, that is totally not acceptable. And then, when you looked, if you looked at the history of action, I have listened to the governments of the US, the government of the US and the UK say things about the lackluster, using your word, response that they got even when they came with support. Because part of what had happened was that by saying that the government of Nigeria did not have sufficient capacity, it wasn't even about a lack of willingness. It was simply, let's focus on capacity. If it didn't have it, the world needed to rally behind it. Those countries will tell you up until today that they really were surprised at the tentativeness, the denial, at the disdain that happened at different levels in trying to rescue Chibok girls. So anyone who tries to put the role that we played in saying that children of our country deserve the right of rescue by their government, side by side, the political fortunes of an individual, that is so unfair.
So one more question on the political side before we move on. A lot of people will say that the opposition took advantage of that position, or what the BBOG, Bring Back Our Girls, did in order to make sure that their candidate won the 2015 elections. How would you respond to that?
How I would respond to that would be, is there any action on my part that in any way suggested that the opposition could determine whether we stood for Chibok girls or did not? There is no such thing. It's all people trying to piece things together and just create a narrative. I can tell you, if you spoke to the people who, diverse people who would walk in, it was open space. If you were driving your car in Abuja and you saw the advocacy and you wanted to just come and stand for Chibok girls, you did that. So there was absolutely nothing. And as a matter of fact, people would tell you that I was so strident about the matter of not coming to the Unity Fountain with any political conversations. In fact, it was one of our core values to just keep the politics away from the girls. I was shocked at the fact that whether it was on the side of government or on the side of the opposition party, girls were just being seen not as the human beings that we should all be totally upset were being allowed to go further and further away. The time Nigeria wasted discussing power. Power for what? Power that has not delivered anything to the people? How was that going to contest with the right to freedom of the children? You know, Constance, one of my worst days at the beginning of the advocacy was when a parent, that two of the daughters were taken, said to me that the only reason we're going through this in the manner we're going through it is because we're poor and we're nobodies. Say, if it were the children of big men, that's the way he put it, there is no way you will need to come out to be begging for them to pay attention to our children. Now, for me, I was raised by a father who said that even if I didn't fight for my own right, I must fight for the right of the other person.
So still on that, most of them were from poor families. A lot of them are still in captivity. Is there any hope at all that these girls will return?
I don't know. I frankly don't know. But one thing I know is that there have been cases around the world where even after 20 years, abducted people returned. I know that some of the news that we've heard about some of them, it's not good. So in cases where they say that quite a number died in the course of raids or other forms of calamities that occasioned death. And cases where people use this very strange word of saying they've been married away. Who gave them in marriage to who? You know, it's just crazy. But one thing that I want the media to focus more on would be this matter of disclosure. I think it's important for a society that was traumatized by this level of tragedy to insist on disclosure, because the government of the day at that time set up the Major Brigadier General or Major General Sabo panel. It submitted a report. We still don't know what the details. That report should transparently be uploaded for everyone to have access to it. Then the Buhari administration decided to institute another panel. Where is the report? We need such level of transparency and disclosure of all that went down in the abduction of those girls. It does help society to build resilient systems to prevent recurrences. And we see how many times Chibok girls has happened. Dapchi happened, yes, and many others happened. And then it is important for us to hold the government to account for both the girls that have been brought back and the girls that are not yet brought back, in the sense that accountability would then help get to closure. A number of these parents would like to know closure. And it is unfair to continue to disdain their rights just because they do not have the kind of agency that people like you and I have.
So I was also in Chibok in 2015. I went there when the government tried to sort of take care of the school and lay the foundation for the rebuilding of the school. There we have some images there. Yeah, so I took these pictures with my phone from the air when we were landing, and so you see a very arid, dry bone. That's the school right there, dormitory, and somewhere in the middle there was a canopy that was set up for the event to lay the foundation to rebuild the school. So yeah, that's some military people right there that received us. And when I was seeing these pictures from, or when I was seeing these images from up, what I kept thinking was the large expanse of land and how difficult it is to police the whole of this area. You know, very, very. Okay, that's the chopper that we came with. We landed in Yola, Adamawa State, which is not too far from Borno State, and there was some soldiers. It was heavily guarded around that time, so there was a lot of guided tours to Chibok if you wanted to go there as journalists. And then these are some journalists that came with us on that trip, both cameramen from print, from television stations as well. And that this is the school, actually. that was set on fire, everything burnt to ashes. I remember standing there and thinking how terrified these students were, you know, and then that's me at the airport. Yeah, so yeah, I was there, and it was horrific, you know, to think that children will go through this and we're totally helpless, and the parents are helpless, and the government is not there to do something about it.
Yes, Constance, and you probably followed or may not have followed that we felt so connected to the pains of these parents that when the government said they wanted to go with us on a guided tour for us to see how the military and the Air Force were carrying on operations, it was the most difficult thing to have to do. You were going with hostile people to go and see, be in the enemy front in Sambisa. So, but we went. I went on that journey, accompanied by Aisha Yesufu, Alan Manessa, who is from Chibok, and Morocco, you know, somebody, Usman, you know, and we went to do this. Do you know that hardly did we return than a jet was taken down? We could have been casualties.
It's very risky.
So when I hear people just talk glibly, they project what they are capable of doing at people who sincerely, with all their outrage, moral outrage, at the fact that in the 21st century, we would have a calamity on our hands and choose rather to major in the minors at the expense of the lives of 219 girls because of the 276 that they captured that night. 57 were able to escape.
Yes.
Now, 219 daughters of Nigeria are at risk, and we all don't sort of find that as a rallying point. I have to tell you that the kind of decay that Nigeria has suffered since Chibok girls' tragedy tells us a story of who we are as a people.
You know, I remember being in the air that day and thinking this is clearly a war zone. You could feel it. It wasn't a joke for the people that live there. BBOG was a thorn in the flesh of the government for a very long time. How were you able to make it a formidable group? Because it could be a case study in how powerful movements can be and what impact that they can make.
As a matter of fact, I think it's either the foreign policy journal, magazine, or the other one, Foreign Affairs, that has some sort of a study around what the BBOG was able to do. Number one is there is nothing that takes the place of volunteerism. The truth is, the BBOG, contrary again to what a lot of people were narrating, BBOG was self-funded. I am telling you, do you know that some of the parents were so dislocated, they couldn't even find where to lay their heads? From my own family, meager resources, we paid rent for some families of Chibok. We did not, when the United Nations, the UN envoy came to visit, said, could we give the movement some resources? We said, no. We don't want to get into matter of resources. The most important resource that we need is showing up and saying action must be taken to rescue Chibok girls. And so for us, that power of volunteerism, that office of the citizens being in full expression was so really at the heart of the success of the movement. A second thing was this. The movement was a collective. There was nothing, and the collectivism that underpinned everything we did, the total transparency. We made decisions right there at the Unity Fountain. It was not a case of any. So I hear people, they tell stories, they lie, they do all kinds of things, all to discredit. But you know something? It cannot be discredited.
But the group doesn't seem to be active anymore. What's going on?
All right.
Briefly.
So by the time of COVID, we couldn't, when everybody had gone home, the group for 7 years of our lives, every day, I didn't say some days, we didn't alternate. Every day we were sitting at the Unity Fountain. Look, part of the kind of, what would I call it, silliness that I saw was that Nigerians do not value their lives sufficiently. So when a person like me decided that I could set aside everything because I had promised that I was going to demand action until action was taken about these girls, they would look at you and think, oh, the only reason you're doing it is because you don't have a job. My goodness, I had to set aside my advisory role to a number of presidents. That was my assignment at that time. I had to apologize to them and say, I've taken on this responsibility that justice must be done, these girls. Therefore, I won't be able to make my usual 10 days stay in your countries. I'd have to give my time to the matter of these girls. They say, oh, the reason you're doing this is because you are bitter. I'm thinking, bitter over what? If there was any bitterness in me, it was in the fact that we were failing those girls. Or they say that, oh, the reason that you're doing this is because you need attention. Attention? No, I don't need any attention. I have a husband at home. That's the attention that I deserve.
The group started under President Goodluck Jonathan, and he was heavily criticized for being too slow. And then when President Muhammad Buhari was sworn in, it continued its activities. Were you impressed under that different administration?
Of course we were not. Have you forgotten that under President Jonathan, the advocacy was just barely a year? The rest of the 6 years I just told you about, including when, as an adversarial government, they wanted to shame us by saying, okay, if you really want to know what is going on, come with us to Sambisa. And we said, sure, let's go to Sambisa. The chief of, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces at that time go to Sambisa. They didn't go, but we went. So during the period of the other administration, the successor administration, the group, you've forgotten that they hauled us into the police station in zone. Sometimes I don't know these areas, but the AI something headquarters.
Yeah, the group was hounded so many times.
We were hounded over the period. For goodness sake, a lot of Nigerians would say to things like this, snide remarks, just because they want to discredit. They say, oh, you people were campaigning during the time of President Jonathan. As soon as he left office, you stopped. And I'm like, wow. How can you lie so badly? For 6 years after, every day, we were completely, totally committed. The fact is, even 6 months into the advocacy for Chibok girls, we had people who said to us, pick your mat and go away, because these girls are not coming back. We insisted. It was not until year 2 that the first girl, Amina Ali Nkeke, showed up. A proof of life that we were not wrong to believe that action could get them back.
Since after that time, there have been many Chiboks, up until this day, whether it's banditry, kidnapping. The other day was Kaduna, over 200 children kidnapped, boys and girls these days. What does that say of our society?
Well, it says that a society that fails to insist on good behavior has opened a market for bad behavior. So when Chibok girls were abducted, for me, one critical issue was, hey, our government must show strength. Governments that don't show strength imperil the present and the future of society. I wanted our government to show strength to these fellows that you can't do this to us. I wanted us to prove that you cannot, you better not ever dream of thinking that you would subordinate our civilization to your savagery. That was necessary because signaling is everything. We signaled wrongly, and guess what has happened?
We opened up Pandora's box.
We opened up an industry for kidnapping. There's a kidnap economy. Some of the people who were very, very disdainful of our advocacy, I have seen some who come up to me and say things like, I am really sorry. Do you know somebody in the family was abducted? I didn't take this abduction thing seriously until it happened. And I'm like, oh, it had to happen to you for you to realize that whenever something is wrong in the society, it could potentially be any of us. And so we all must act in that sense of shared humanity. There's a shared humanity. The sense of shared values must always direct our action. I have been shocked at some of the people who would say, oh, when it happens in other people's places, you will talk. But when it happens in your own place, you're not talking. And I say, look at these fellows. You know, Constance, I actually saw what was going on. It got to the point where I did a solo march, a one-woman march in this country. I was livid because one day they killed in Ebonyi, they killed in Benue, they killed in Adamawa, they killed in Taraba. And I'm like, and we're all sitting like lame dogs and not saying a word. And I said, let me show that there is a power of one so that people would know that we can't sit like this. I did that. I was mocked. I was attacked, insulted. What have I not taken? But I basically said to myself, I will stand on the firm grounds of what society should be. And once I was done doing that, the next thing I decided to do is to train new leaders. And that's exactly what I'm doing, because talking to people who are tone deaf is blunt instrument, and there's no point using a blunt instrument for anything. And so right now, my interest is in producing a supply pipeline of a new set of political leaders, not just in our country, but on our continent, because the curse on Africa is its political class.
Unfortunately, we couldn't get to speaking about that. Maybe, come back next time. But Mrs.
Yes, we must talk about SPPG sometimes.
We have to. Mrs. Ezekwesili, thank you so much for joining us on Arise Prime Time.